Hope you guys are okay with this. Tomware and I thought it's important to give an early shout out to the ever-expanding Epic Pop Robot Rocket Punch team. You guys are truly epic and we super appreciate you. Ivan, Grant, Con, Jack, RJ, Mr. Tweets, Matthias, Peter, Robert, Kelso, Kevin, Derek, Dom, Nick, Danny, John, Andy, Philippe, Jake, Pete, Ben, Justin, and let's welcome Iffy-chan to the team. Welcome, mate. Thank you so much, guys. Hey Brobots, another video done, another week in the can. 3 parts for you in this one. Number 1 is lacquers, and I know some of you have been looking forward to additional lacquer hand painting content from me. The detail, because it's such a small piece that we're working on, the depth that I can go into, and I can explain more of the thought process and how it differs from painting water-based acrylics. So, you know, the difference is really, really important here. And it's not just a straight technique thing, it's really about how you think about lacquers that will improve your performance with them. We do need to think about them differently. They're a completely different beast. Next step then is using water-based acrylics. We're using Game Color from Acrylicos Vallejo for the OSL details. And then the third section is good because it's a recovery situation. Due to putting and inventing, experimenting with different things, putting different things together, although one works perfectly and the next one might work perfectly done separately, sometimes putting them together doesn't quite work out. So I'm going to show you how I backtracked from an experiment that didn't quite work out. Hope you really like this one. Let's get going. Round 1. Okay, let's get into some Linc, almost patented, lacquer hand brush painting action. This one will be really fun. It's because the flight suit is quite tight. I think it'll be good to contrast it with a hand painted and very machine Krieger type thing. I've got this paint already in here. Some of it had dried up a little while ago. I poured some. It says this, but it's really it's Gaia T07. Gosh, it's called moderate thinner, and but it's the one that's self-leveling thinner. It's just the Gaia version of it. Any of them will be fine. They're highly compatible, both this brand and Gaia Notes. Yeah, you can see it's starting to shift a little bit. I'm going to go with a roughed brush. A roughed brush. It's been roughed. Man, my English is so bad sometimes. What I'm going to do is, my plan here is, this is Tamiya fine primer spray, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in a little bit of a shadow coat, because you can see, you might be able to see, there's a little bit of like still the yellow, the beige poking through, and what I'm going to do is lay in a little bit of a pre-shade, but with a nasty rough brush. As silly as that sounds, it's probably just better if I show, and you can see the magic of lacquer here is that this is reactivating, and heaven knows how long this has been here. If I want the paint to be super good, I mix until, see that white poking through? Does mean I'm at the bottom of the dish, and it means I'm getting all that goodness up. All of the paint layers have reactivated. Gosh, that's magical. So's the smell. Okay, not too much on the brush. And now this one is the epitome of start loose, finish tight. It really can be pretty rough. First time I saw, or anybody else do this, I was like, my goodness. You could paint the whole thing. That would be cool too. It's not super important. It's how you finish that will become... The finish defines the finish. I was really thinking that in my mind, but it really is that simple. How you finish is the most important part. These features will benefit from a little bit of... So anywhere there's panel lines will benefit from being darker, and especially in here where there's a bit of apparent shadow around these edges. That's where I want it to be darkest. And to create some unevenness when we hand paint white back over the top. Now, not too thick, I'll then wipe the remains back on around the outside a little, and this becomes a very interesting pre-layer. This will cause some happy accidents to happen. You can see adding no more paint to the brush, and it's getting quite dry now. I think that should be plenty. It almost looks cool and good to go as is, doesn't it? We could almost use that just as a finish in of itself. This one, like the dark grey over a lighter green color, perhaps would look really good as a night camo type thing. Okay, cool. I'm gonna let this dry just for a few minutes and then come back and we'll go white. Okay, next white. A dash of thinner. There's like a white paint and like a light grey paint in there. Perfect, that'll give us a little bit of flavor. Mixer. And what's this one? I missed the color Off-White. It's a full gloss paint. Right, wow, yeah, I haven't used this forever, if ever. So a bit. Wow, yeah, this. There we go. Think we're good? Now I don't need that much, and you can see it's got just a nice amount of yellow and a bit of grey in it. It's perfect. It's right across the camera. Now I don't do this because I'm tight to clean the extra paint off this. I don't know why it is, but whenever I do this, the first brush strokes out of the gate after getting this paint off the stirrer seem to have nigh magical properties. I'm not kidding. I always get excited. The first ones off are like so good. I'll do the cleanup later. Let's get into it. Starting with the larger surfaces first. Okay, so I'm going to go on pretty heavy because what I know I can do is clean up once we get there. Let's go. I do want a pretty clean surface for this, so I'll go pretty wet and quite heavy. There we go. Now while we go, the most common question I get is, how do you stop it from reactivating the undercoats? And now I'm going to attempt to say this without sounding like a complete D-bag. I hope I've prefaced that so that when I say it, I don't. But the thing is, when you ask that question, you're thinking about lacquer paints wrong. You're not looking at them, or a nicer way to say that is, you're not yet thinking in the required way to understand lacquer paints. Because, let me redeem myself by answering that in a nice way. See what the internet has done to me? I can't just say what I think. I'm ruined. See, when you're thinking about not reactivating underlayers, you're thinking in a water-based layer upon layer upon layer mindset. Whereas what you've got to do is you have to change and think about lacquers like you would a watercolor painting. I know it sounds bizarro world opposite, but I'm 100% for real. When you work with watercolors, you have to think of them as like, impermeable layers that you paint, you let it dry, you paint, you let it dry, and it works. It's fantastic. I mean, we just did it on our figure. It works. But for these things, the beast that is Japanese lacquer paints, it doesn't work like that at all. Look at that. There's some wonderful happy accidents, or am I leaving them on purpose? Let's not think too deeply about it, excuse me. 重く感じるっていう日本語だと you say, think heavy in Japanese. That's why I get it wrong often. So, with lacquers, it's a given that we activate the underlayers. It's a given. So instead of looking for ways to avoid that, we're looking at ways to both use, control, and enhance that as you would with a watercolor painting. See, it's a complete paradigm shift. You have to look at, to be able to master hand painting lacquers. You really have to throw out your preconceived notions about how we paint with all other paints, because they're completely different, except exactly the same as, say, watercolors. So it's no wonder that our Japanese friends developed this technique, because suisei, the original watercolor art, is theirs. So we can go back at any time and reactivate the underlayers to make effects. So it's not something to avoid, it's really something to embrace and master and learn and enjoy. So I hope that came across well. I mean that in the best possible way, but yeah, it's not something to avoid, it's something to embrace. Sounds difficult at first, but that's practice. Once upon a time, you and I found walking difficult. We found talking difficult. Now look at us. Now, coming up on first layer looking pretty good. As you can see, I'm sketching it on reasonably loose. Trying to work from wet, but here look, I'm reactivating it over an edge that had already dried. Okay, a little bit more here. And look at that, it's white but not, isn't it? Now for a first stage look, it's looking quite spectacular. See how it's leaving some shadow there as well? And I'd estimate this is about 1/3 of the way to the full thickness that I have in mind. There we go. A bit more in here. Gosh, that looks good already. Now let's let that firm up. And we'll come back and look at what we've got when it dries. How does it look, Tomoe? Zoom, sure. Cool, thank you. Round 2, fight! Okay, guys, this is dried overnight. And you don't need to let it do that. It's just because it was the end of my workday. Sorry if there's a bit of background noise today too. We've got a rainstorm here, and you know, people go crazy in the rain, so there's a bit of background noise. My apologies. Here's how we look, and I'll put in I'll share some other photos that I've got for you. I took some close-up photos as well, so you can have a really good look at it. That's how we are, and you can see how, despite painting the off-white onto it, the grey is mixing in there. And I wanted to show you this. You can see that in painting back to the white, the grey is also mixing back in here. No, that's not a problem. That is a feature. We want that to happen. Okay, round 2. What I'll almost always do when I'm kicking off with lacquer painting, hand brushing with lacquer paints, is I'll give it a dash of this, because you always want to start off a little thinner. And I'll add a little bit more white. Also note that I haven't cleaned this off from last time, because I knew I'd be continuing on here. Still well mixed. Yep, we're good. Just making sure the bottom's not too chunky. judging by the thickness of paint. How are we looking? Then the next step I usually do is I put this into the thinner. It instantly softens the brush. And then, as I mentioned last time, I get that magic paint. It's like that first sip of coffee in the morning, but way more toxic. Okay, we're a bit thick for now, so let's put this off to the side. Judge our thickness, because as I go on with subsequent steps, I want to make it thinner and thinner. You start off thick, just like how we start loose, finish tight. We also start thick and start finishing thin. So we need a little bit more. Looks about right. So having something that you can carefully pour lacquer thinner in is very important, because it can be too much very quickly, way too quickly. For those of you joining me for the first time in using one of these dishes, I use them because you can see I can test the paint on the side and I can check how thin it is, whilst also leaving some of the thicker paint in the middle. So it helps me to pick up thin paint here, thick paint down here, and I can have multiple mixes happening. It's a very fluid thing. It's somewhat similar to a wet palette, but much more complicated and technical. For those of you who don't paint with lacquer paints, it might be something to keep away from, but lacquers are more technical in the way that they're changing much more quickly in consistency and handling characteristics. Plus, you've also got to think in 3D for your model because of the layering. With acrylics, we just layer one upon the other, which is good. It's very fundamentally simple. When painting with these, it's much more like a watercolor approach. So I'm judging my thickness and layers here. This one is a very good medium, happy balance for hand brushing. I'm sorry that I chose a color here that's probably very difficult to see by video, but you'll see very quickly what it looks like once I use it with the brush. I hope that wasn't too long and wordy, but I don't otherwise get an opportunity to make mention of these sort of things. We'll start around the back, just to kind of warm up a little. Now, I'll often use a flat brush for this, but I want to keep a quite high resolution for this one. I want it to look quite detailed. You'll see I left a thin part there because I imagined the outside of the helmet, as he's putting it back on the rack, that's where it would get scuffed. So I'm leaving that there visible. So it's like a pre-weathering, a pre-chipping technique. So when people ask, what kind of chip is that? It's different to chipping, different to, what would I say, the hairbrush technique. It's quite different to that, but it produces such a pleasing result. I mean, look at that. Once that dries, it will look amazing, if I do say so myself. Now, as I'm coming along with these wetter coats, I'm going to stay a little bit more clear of the panel lines. We don't want the paint developing thickness in there. Cool. So that side is really, really good. Now I'll show you some more maybe on the front here, but the rest of it I'll be handling it very similar to that. Where is cool? Let's go with perhaps the visor next. Now I imagine I want to keep a little bit of a shadow area around here and up under here, but also leave some of these wonderful chips that I've, happy accident chips that have developed across the top. So there's another cool scuff mark. So again, one of the differences here with acrylic work is that you do need to be thinking ahead. You need to be watching that car's tail lights through your head, because you can be saving yourself a great deal of time and effort by placing the chips as you work, rather than having to add them in over the top afterwards. But see what I mean about the traffic? It's amazing today out there. Because it's raining, all the crazies are out. But in leaving some of these effects, it adds a great deal of variety to your finish, and then we can still do the traditional chipping techniques over the top, which will add an incredible amount of visual detail to our model. There's a fantastic looking chip right where it would happen. So I need a little bit more thinner because I'm coming down a little tighter, so just a drop. Work some in here on the thinner upper section. So I can tell by how much sits on the brush too. Like that. That's nice and thin now. I'll get this in up under here. Oh, that's beautiful. Now, it's looking the consistency of, say, airbrush paint here. Very thin. And you can see as I'm working, the underlayers are not that much of an issue. That's why when I get asked that question, and you know, it's easily in that top, say, you know, 3 questions I get, it's the underlayers. Even with the paint very thin like this, can you see that the underlayers are not particularly bothering me? Now, one thing I need to do, because of the OSL effect I'm going for, I need to start layering up white inside here. It needs to be a good color, but not too thick. So this thin paint is perfect for it, because it self-levels beautifully inside there. Okay. Let's blend that in a little bit more here. So when the paint is thinner like this too, it will reactivate the previous wet edge, and despite it looking a little harsh there now, what it does is melts that back in. And you'll see what I mean when we come back to it. The dry and the wet effect is quite pronounced. So that's layer 2. It's probably enough. I want the helmet to look a little beat up. That's looking quite good. You can see that's layer 2 there. The rest is still on layer 1. Now I'll continue working that across the top of the helmet, the back here, and the chin guard. And we'll be back and I'll show you how it looks. Okay, back with some wet palette action. I'd like to say that I left this as a test the other day, but no, I cleaned up and completely forgot about it. So for real, that's what happened. And this is what it looks like. You can see that I didn't put that much water into it when we did it, but it was still not dried out. I added about maybe 1 centimeter of water in the bottom one of these. And I just put it into the corner here to make sure this area is still nice and wet. You'll remember these colors. This is what I did my Rappoon with. And I want to do something quite similar with this one. So let's reuse the past. Okay, it's probably a little thick. It's a little bit more water. Here we go. I rewatched my own video, both for last. It's actually not a bad video, the OSL one. And it was quite helpful. I wanted to see my paint recipe just to be double sure, and to see the techniques. So very simply, let's put in a base coat of this one. So first things first is the, which is the dark one? It's this one, isn't it? The Scorpion Green, I'm sure it was called. Escopenda Green. And then we'll be doing the highlight with Livery Green. And then I plan to, because of the super awesome consistency of these ones, I had been using that Schmincke white, but I'm going to test this one because the consistency of those paints is fantastic and somewhat similar to the Schmincke. So let's give that a go. I'm working with the size 1 Series 7 brush. I've made sure that the white is reasonably solid there in the center to give me a base that looks bright off, but also leaving a little bit of darkness around the outside, just to give it some extra relief there. Gosh, that looks good already. See the glossiness of the base will work for us there. Now I'll add a little bit more water again to almost do like a very light wash around the outside here. thanks to the translucent nature of these game color paints, it should build up quite quickly. And because the base is nice and gloss, it's quite slippery too, which helps with the glazing. Maybe a little thick there. Now one of the really cool things is if this goes awry, it's very easy to backtrack because of the strong and now dry lacquer base. We could use some alcohol or metho and just very quickly wipe it off. Actually, we could just even dunk it in water really quick and all the acrylics would come off and our base would be impervious to it. And the benefits of using chemistry. Science, y'all! To our advantage. That sounded quite crazy, didn't it? Do you like when I'm painting small, my voice gets smaller? I'm using my scale-appropriate glazing voice. Tomoe is giggling behind the camera. I turned around to check. Otherwise, and I thank her for it. It would have been quite a lonely moment for me if I got 0 real-time laughs. Okay. That's pretty good. Let's mix up the brighter tone. Yeah, these game color paints are nice. Very bright. Let's dry it instantly. Yep. Another wash around the outside with this one. I'll put some pinpoints inside too, just to make it a little bit brighter right at the bottom. Gosh, look at that. So this is a large brush, but it's very pointy. Almost looks like I'm painting with Mountain Dew, doesn't it? But if I was using Mountain Dew, I would have painted it much faster. But okay, how are we looking? Some of it around the outside is maybe a little heavy. Let's test how that rubs back with water. So I've got a little bit of water on my brush. And yeah, it's coming off just lightly. Gosh, that's a cool effect. Lovely. A little bit on the top there, it's a little heavy. And yeah, the finger's done it. The creative desperation of rubbing the finger in. Okay, we're looking pretty good. Being a larger model, I think that's more than enough. Mostly to give us that nice little focal point. I'm going to do some of the white, the AK white. I thought about going down through a graduation, but no, it's looking quite good. I'm going to go with an executive decision here and blend some of this in. Gosh, look at that. That is lovely. You know, this is up there with that spinky white, man. Quite liking it. Okay, size 1, going pointy. Let's dot out our middle. Small circle, small circle. Very small circle. Okay, not bad. As that dries, I might try a very thin glaze of the bright color over the top, but we'll see how that dries. These paints are quite translucent, so what I'll do is I might try to clean it a little around the outside now while it's damp. Oh yeah. Oh, yeah, these are quite a nice paint to work with. Look, it's a little bit nervous making, but yeah, I quite like the look of that. Let's see how it looks in photos. But I think that makes us, besides a couple more little, I might do a little bit of weathering once I do it on the boots, but that will be after we have the cockpit together. I think Thumbs Up Man is done for us for now. And out of all the pilots I've done, this would be pilot number maybe 3 or 4. Easily, this guy is the best. All that extra work with the acrylics is really painted off. Thank you, Thumbs Up Man. Okay, guys, the recovery time. I thought this is important for me to add for you because I think one of the most educational things, both for me and for you, is to share these steps that don't work out. So, I believe it's due to, now, this is the first time I've done this approach over the top of glass. If you remember on my Rappoon, I'll flick a picture up. I was painting Vallejo over Vallejo, so it was flat acrylic over flat acrylic, and that works perfectly. It gives the right illusion of glow. But in the close-up photos, due to the high quality of the photo, it's showing the base coat, the gloss white, is reflecting through the green, whilst the green looks now more like instead of the green standing on top of the white, it looks like the white is shining through, which completely ruined the illusion of glow. So, let's recover. Take this back a step. I'll be using this one. You can use denatured alcohol, of course. As you guys know, I mention it all the time. I use this one for pretty much everything. I'll just need a little bit. Today's Japanese 1-point lesson is membo desu. We call it what? Q-tip or cotton bud. And you know how it says don't put these in your ears? What else are they for? That and modeling. Okay. Lightly damp, and this will come off super easy. Look at that. Actually, it's kind of leaving a bit of a cool stain, which might actually work. Now, one thing is, don't be too aggressive with this stuff. Even as thin as this is, the lacquer paints, they're durable, but they're still not, they're not bulletproof. You can actually take them off, even with a very light thinner like this. Cool, there we go, we're done. It's left a stain, which may actually end up looking really cool. That would be hilarious, wouldn't it? But just for us, don't tell anyone. It might be one of those cool little mistakes that makes it work. Yeah, I'm liking that. Because it leaves just a nuance of the green color is left. But yeah, that's it. I'm gonna work it back to that and then let it be. Coolness. I'll re-photograph that and share it with you, but I think that's what we'll leave it at. That we can't go too thick with it. Coolness. I hope you like that. Recovery steps. Boom, done. Hey, thanks for watching that through with me, guys. I hope the length and level of detail is good there for you. I was really happy that I had such a good opportunity to do a recovery one with you. I hope that worked. Next, moving along, we're going to get into the Lacquer proper. Now, my idea in mind, my vision for this project is that, and my experience with doing these before is that basically a Lacquer project has 2 parts. Number 1 is the figure, because we want to see the pilot because we can then live vicariously through him and enjoy flying the Lacquer when we zoom around the room with the sound effects, etc. The whoosh and the pew pew. So Number one is figure. The pilot is really important. Of lesser importance is the cockpit, so I'm going to speed through that a little bit faster. And then there's the overall finish of the Volker. And it's a reason I'm holding my hands like this, because aliens. Now it's because the Volker is about yay big. And due to its size, it lends itself a lot of detail, just to sheer physical, girth. It's a big model, right? So putting those two together, we have the slightly more detailed figure, and then putting it together with the weathered and interesting finish on the Volker will work together. And let me also make mention of this, that the reason I'm thinking of the two parts is purely for the video content and for the publication. If I was making one of these models just for my shelf, I would tone it way back on the figure. Unless you really wanted to share it around social media and get some interaction there, then I would put 95% of my focus back on the exterior of the Volker. So I just wanted to make mention of that. This would not be my usual way of doing it. It's specific to the task at hand, if that makes sense. Coolness, we'll be back with that soon. And in a couple of weeks, we've got GBWC, so I'll be doing some shares from there as well. Thanks a bunch, guys. Have a great weekend. We'll talk soon. Bye. Big thanks to Hobbyco and Little Robot for their support and for bringing us the best brands and live events from Japan. Support local. And of course, the Brobot Inner Circle, the awesome folks that make this happen. I couldn't do it without you. Always, thank you so very much. Please join us.